Welcome to Barton Village. As usual, this video is designed as an aid to exploration. Log off the computer, pull up this video on your phone, and go for a walk. Each time I'm done talking about a building, I'll throw up a map to get you to the next one. Pause the video and take a stroll. Indeed, feel free to wander off script for a while. I'll still be there when you get to the next site, and there's always another side street to explore. Barton Street began its life as a rural concession road, and indeed its name derives from Barton Township, the collection of farms and villages which Hamilton grew up within and eventually entirely absorbed. The area's future, however, was changed forever in 1853 when the Great Western Railway was built parallel to the road. The line was Hamilton's first railway, and an important connection to not only southwestern Ontario and Toronto, but also the rapidly growing United States. By the 1890s and 1900s, as Hamilton established itself as one of Canada's leading industrial centres, those industries established themselves almost entirely along the railway tracks north of Barton Street, where an impressive collection of industrial architecture survives to this day. The growth of the area was especially prompted by the development of two major industries, Westinghouse, which established a plant in Hamilton in 1897, and International Harvester, which established a Hamilton plant in 1902. Both plants were in the Barton Street area, and they led to a retail and residential boom in the first decade of the 20th century as newly arrived European immigrants were attracted to work in the plants. Indeed, the late 19th and early 20th centuries saw waves of immigration from southern and eastern Europe into Canada, with the arrival of countless Italians, Jews, Germans, Poles, Greeks, and Russians. Many of those individuals were impoverished and unskilled, crowding into cities such as Montreal, Toronto, and Winnipeg. Thousands of those individuals made their way to Hamilton, where they provided the labor necessary to power the city's industrial boom and established a series of communities along Barton Street, despite facing widespread prejudice as undesirable foreigners. The Barton Street area, never prestigious, declined substantially in the second half of the 20th century, but is beginning to experience a resurgence and faces an exciting future. Because of the size of the territory to be covered, we have divided Barton Village into two walks. The first one, this one, covers the area west of Wentworth Street, while a second walk covers the area east of Wentworth Street. Today's walk begins at the intersection of Barton and Wentworth Streets. This stretch of Barton Street was developed almost overnight in a development boom at the beginning of the 20th century. While a streetcar line had been established down the street in 1890, in 1900 it remained an almost entirely residential street. By 1915, Barton Street from Wellington to Sherman presented a nearly continuous row of shops on both sides of the street. Accompanying this retail development was a parallel rise in the need for banking services. The building on the southwest corner of Barton and Wentworth was erected in 1913 for the Royal Bank to plans by Kenneth Guscote Rea, a Montreal architect with close ties to the Royal Bank, who designed nearly 24 Royal Bank branches, stretching from Nova Scotia to British Columbia. Walk 3 blocks west on Barton Street to the corner of Barton and St. Matthews Streets. The plaza on the northeast corner of the intersection stands in what was once the site of St. Matthew's Anglican Church. The congregation was established in 1887 and hired William Arthur Edwards, a Hamilton architect, to design a simple Gothic building for them that year. Edwards was called back to expand the building twice, first in 1888 and again in 1892, and for many years the structure stood as a substantial reminder of Barton Street's character prior to the development of the commercial strip. The structure was destroyed, however, in a 1966 fire, and after a delay the congregation voted in 1967 to amalgamate with the Congregation of Christ Church rather than rebuild. Across Barton Street, on the southwest corner of Barton and Smith, is another of the area's oldest churches, this one having survived to the present day. St. Andrew's Presbyterian was established in 1856 as a mission service by Old St. Andrews, with initial services being held outdoors in tents. A simple frame building was later erected on Wentworth Street, but the present site wasn't acquired until 1885, at which point the core of the present building was constructed. The current Barton Street facade, however, dates to a dramatic expansion of the church undertaken in 1906 to plans by the local firm of Stewart and Whitten. Reflecting the changing face of the area, the building is now home to a congregation of Spanish Pentecostals. From St. Andrew's Presbyterian, walk 3 blocks west to East Avenue, turn left, and walk half a block south to 225 East Avenue. 225 East Avenue was typical of the smaller industries which nestled among both the industrial giants and the residential side streets of Barton Village. Built in 1911, the building was home for decades to the Royal Oak Dairy, a milk bottling company at a time when milkmen with horse-drawn wagons would still deliver milk door to door in the early morning. The building has since been converted into artists' studios. Continue south to Robert Street, then turn right. Walk 2 blocks west on Robert to West Avenue and turn right again. You're looking for the former West Avenue Public School, just south of Barton Street. Built in 1885 to plans by Lucian Hills, a prominent Hamilton architect, the West Avenue Public School was designed to house the area's growing population. An imposing building featuring an elaborate brickwork and occasional stone and wood highlights. The school was closed in 1993 and subsequently renovated into apartments. Immediately north of the West Avenue Public School is the Hamilton General Hospital. The property was purchased by the City of Hamilton in 1879. At the time, the location was well out into the countryside, a factor which actually spoke in the site's favour, as the remote site was considered healthier, both for the patients being housed there and for the broader city, which would face a lower risk of contagion when infectious diseases were being treated at the hospital. Lucian Hills, Hamilton's leading architect at the time, was asked to design a complex of 3 buildings on the site in 1880, producing a refined trio of Second Empire buildings. The hospital remains one of Hamilton's leading medical institutions, but has undergone dramatic physical change over the years. The complex housing the Hamilton General Hospital was expanded as early as 1892, and then repeatedly over the subsequent decades, with at least one new building a decade since the 1890s, and no structure built before the Second World War surviving as part of the current complex. Walk a block east on Barton Street to Victoria Street, then turn left, stopping at 286 Victoria Avenue. The classical structure at 286 Victoria was built in 1924 for the Babies Dispensary Guild, a charitable organization associated with the city's medical community. The group was founded in 1911 to provide milk for infants born into especially impoverished families in Hamilton, contracting with a farm outside the city for that purpose. By 1924, however, the organization's mandate had expanded dramatically, with the group providing support and advice to young mothers in the city on infant care generally. The building remained associated with the city's medical community in a succession of capacities until 2016, when it was purchased by the City of Hamilton. Continue north on Victoria Avenue until you cross the tracks of the Great Western Railway. The building on the east side of Victoria Avenue, stretching from the railway tracks to Shaw Street, is the former home of the Hamilton Electric Light and Cataract Power Company. The company was formed, as the name suggests, to bring electrical power to Hamilton in the days before the harnessing of Niagara Falls on a massive scale. The company erected a generating station at Dessous Falls in St. Catharines and transmitted the electricity to Hamilton, where an electrical substation was established in this building. Edmund Brown Patterson, a Hamilton architect with close ties to the Cataract Power Company, was selected to design the St. Catharines and Hamilton facilities, both of which were completed in 1898. Between 1899 and 1907, the company consolidated all the electrical railways operating in the Hamilton area, and during the 1910s and 1920s was one of Hamilton's leading companies, but by the 1930s the company had disappeared into provincial consolidations. Continue north 2 blocks on Victoria Street to the intersection of Victoria and Ferry Streets. The buildings on the northeast and southeast corners of Victoria and Ferry are all that remains of the Otis Elevator Company's extensive Hamilton factory, which once stretched dramatically north to the railway tracks and east to Emerald Street. The Otis Elevator Company was established in Brooklyn in 1852, and by the turn of the century, the growth of Toronto, Montreal, Hamilton, and other Canadian centres justified the establishment of a Canadian branch. The factory was erected in 1902 to plans by Hamilton architect William Arthur Edwards. During the Second World War, the facility was retooled to manufacture anti-aircraft guns. Following the closure of Otis's Hamilton facility, the plant sat empty for 3 decades before being demolished in 2013. The factory's offices were spared the wrecking ball at that point and await creative reuse. Walk east on Ferry Street to Emerald Street, then turn left, walking south 2 blocks to Shaw Street. The building on the southeast corner of Emerald and Shaw was the home of the American Can Company. The American Can Company was one of the world's largest tin can manufacturers in the early 20th century, with facilities in 14 US states as well as elsewhere in Ontario. The company first established a presence in Hamilton in 1904, but the present complex wasn't begun until 1911. American Can ceased to operate out of the facility in 1984, and the factory is now home to Karma Candy. We've come to the end of today's walk. From here you can return to the beginning of the tour by walking 3 blocks east on Shaw Street, and 2 blocks south on Wentworth to Barton, an intersection which is also the starting point for part 2 of the Barton Village walk.